This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore. If you have not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. And the reason that I think you should, one of the reasons you should subscribe is based on the title of this video and the things I'm going to talk about. I'm trying to get to 500,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I don't know if that's just a vanity mark, 500,000, but it's a nice round number. And it does play into what I want to talk about today. So thank you. I can only do it with you. Republicans are right now in an all-out march, a push to demonize the LGBTQ community, especially trans people. But it also trickles down to what we thought was kind of a settled issue of Americans accepting marriage equality, that gays and lesbians can marry one another and it's A-okay. And Gallup just released a poll, the title of which, fewer people in the U.S. say same-sex relations morally acceptable. Now I'm going to read a little bit from this, but being a former Republican, someone who was in favor of marriage equality long before even Democrats of the day accepted it, it's a special issue for me. Human rights should be a special issue for you. Equality should be at the tip of all of our tongues, should be at the forefront of all of our minds and our motivations to make sure we have an equitable, egalitarian existence as much as we can force through policy. I truly, fully believe this. So it bothers me a lot when I see the numbers for approval of marriage equality dipping substantially over the course of 1 year, from 2022 to 2023. 15 points among Republicans and even a few points among Democrats. And what this tells me is the media initiative of people in conservative circles like Matt Walsh, like Ben Shapiro, like Michael Knowles is working. And that is why people like me, if not me, someone else like me in my media genre, independent liberal media, whether that be me or Packman or Farron Cousins, people like me, we need to be supported and our content needs to be shared to counter the messages of hate and intolerance and just bigotry that are working on the general public and really working on Republicans. Here's a couple of paragraphs here. Americans' views about the morality of a number of behaviors and practices are largely stable compared with a year ago. However, significantly fewer say same-sex relations are morally acceptable, and more say the death penalty is. Republicans drive the change on same-sex relations. Last year, a record high of 71% of adults said gay and or lesbian relations are morally acceptable. The figure has fallen back this year to 64%, returning to a level last seen in 2019. Still, Americans are far more likely to consider same-sex relations as morally acceptable than in the past, including 38% in 2002 and 54% in 2012. The figure has been 60% or higher since 2015, which, of course, was the Obergefell Supreme Court ruling. Now, listen. Before we address these specific Republican numbers that are very troubling, let's talk about whether or not something should be allowed, permissible, what have you. My view, and for decades and decades it has been this way, if someone else's behavior doesn't harm anyone, anything, no harm comes from it, who cares? Liberty, freedom, this is what this is. And the Republican Party, the party that waved their little pocket constitutions around, the party that screams about personal liberty, they're at the tip of the spear of this. Some things, birth control, divorce, sex between an unmarried man and woman, having a baby outside of marriage, gambling, all of these things. If it doesn't harm someone, who cares? Gay or lesbian relations, 71 to 64%, a 7-point drop year over year overall. And what's driving this drop is this: 54% last year among Republicans. Americans' views on the morality of same-sex relations by political party. Figures are the percentage of, say, gay or lesbian relations are morally acceptable. 56% of Republicans, still a scant majority of Republicans last year believed it. And now 41%, a 15-point drop year over year. This tells me that the Republican narrative and messaging is working. And the reason this is important, the reason this is dangerous, is because there is a target on the back of the LGBTQ community in this country. MAGA bigots are targeting them. There is violence that's being perpetrated against this community that just wants to exist in peace, that just wants to live their lives unmolested by conservative bigots, right-wing freaks, religious fanatics who want to impose their worldview on the rest of us. Who cares what two people do who give consent with their lives? Who cares? And that used to be, it seems to me, the Republican mantra. The people who screamed and yelled and made such a fuss about wearing a mask to protect others around them during COVID are now wanting to inflict their particular worldview, inflicted upon them by their religion, on the rest of the world. Even if the infliction of that particular worldview comes at the hands of violence. That is why this is important. I've seen people's comments, oh, this is just a downtick. We can't tell if it's a trend until several years down the line. Well, if we wait several years down the line, who knows what untold violence and damage will be inflicted upon this marginalized community that's already been on the receiving end of violence and death for decades. So I hope it doesn't seem like a stretch to say that this particular independent media on this side of the coin, on the right side of history, needs to be supported with as much boisterousness, with as much energy as the other side. Because let me tell you, Republicans are here for it. They're here for the fight. They're here for the oppression. And if we're not here to stand up, then what's going to happen? It's going to go beyond a 15-point drop, and it will be manifested by physical violence and actual, real-world physical oppression, not just in attitudes, because that is the nature of how this works. Anyway, I'd love to know what you think. You can call, leave me a brief voicemail, 714-576-4054. Absolutely, of course, as always, you can email me daily at dollemore.com. If you'd like to support my work other than subscribing, which I wish you would, I hope you will, you can click the join button below, become a channel member. You can click the super thanks button below, or even better, go over to patreon.com/IDoubtIt podcast. I love you guys. I appreciate you very much. I'll see you next time. Until I do, be genuine. Take care of one another.